Welcome to this session, which has been dedicated to the independence of Bahrain, Bahrain independence, which happened on the 14th of August 1971. That year, the British decided to withdraw from all the areas east of Suez. It was becoming tired after the Second World War. Financially, it was overwhelmed. And politically, in the wake of the anti-colonial movements in Africa, in Asia, it was at the time they thought that they should withdraw from all that region. And from Bahrain, they completed their withdrawal on the 14th of August. By the end of the year, they were out of the whole region. So today we are marking the Independence Day, Day of Independence of Bahrain. Now, unfortunately, the government of Bahrain does not recognize that day as the Day of Independence or the Independence Day. Instead, they have what they call the National Day on the 16th of December, only to mark the rising to power of the former emir, who was the father of the present ruler, in 1961, 16th of December, upon the death of his father, who was the grandfather of the present ruler. So that was to them the National Day. To us, the National Day is the Day of Independence when the British withdrew. Of course, their withdrawal was also partly caused by the national struggle that had been there in the 50s and 60s. We must not forget that part of that struggle was undertaken by people who were subsequently transferred or exiled to St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean. That was the island where Napoleon Bonaparte was exiled and died there. So 3 of our leaders were exiled in 1957 to that island, and after 4 or 5 years, they were released by the British and they went back. So it was part of the struggle also. So today we are marking that day to highlight the British policy. 52 years after their withdrawal, what has happened to the British policy? What is it? What is the legacy? The situation in the country that had seen an uprising or a revolution in 2011, what has it gained from Britain when it was there and from Britain after it had withdrawn? Did it leave a legacy of democracy, respect of rights, or did it leave a mayhem behind, a political mayhem? And we still hope and will always work to influence the British foreign policy. Many people will see that as almost impossible because the decision of how the foreign policy is shaped is not due to us. It's not us who are influencing it, but it is their interest and their political calculations. However, we still, as regulars, as political activists and human rights activists, will continue. We'll continue to say our word. We'll continue to peacefully struggle in order to achieve our rights, our dignity, our freedom, our democracy in a country which has seen a lot of bloodshed by the regime, a lot of detentions, a lot of exiling, deportations of people, a lot of executions, a lot of murders in the streets by the regime forces. Until today, as we speak, we have about probably up to 1,000 people who, 1,300 in total, who are behind bars, political prisoners now, and out of whom maybe half of them are on hunger strike. They have started a few days ago in protest against the conditions of their jail. but their demands are there. Unfair trials, lack of medical treatment, lack of sanitation, lack of proper family business and contacts. So all in all, the prisoners have decided to go on hunger strike, and so we have some Irish here who know what hunger strike could lead to sometimes. In the case of Northern Ireland, it led to the painful death of 10 people at least when they started their hunger strike in 1981. So we are here today to mark this Independence Day and to hear from my colleagues, our colleagues here, our friends, on how do they see the British foreign policy. So we have 5 speakers. I hope each of them will limit himself or herself to 8 to 10 minutes max. So your speech is very valuable. We'll read it afterwards. But meanwhile, if you can confine yourself to maximum of 10 minutes, Dr. James Thring is known for his activism and has been our friend for several years. And today we want to listen to him. How does he view the foreign policy of the UK, and whether there is any chance of changing it to become a force for good?
Right, thank you. Well, it's very kind of you to give me that introduction. I'm not terribly competent in this field because I've concentrated more on Iraq and Iran than I have on Oman, but I do feel that we need to apologise for the way that the British government has treated the Bahraini people, in the sense that we've always been making friends with the people at the top of the tree, not the people at the bottom. And that leads to sort of corruption in a way, because the people at the top have got their own vested interests about wealth and freedom, and that's sometimes compromised by the demands for freedom and wealth, if you like, by people who actually do the work on the ground. Of course, it used to be well, I won't go into that, but as far as to summarize, we've not a lot of hope in the British government changing its attitude to any of the old colonial, if I dare use that phrase, places, because the interests that run the government are more commercial than they are political. First of all, there's the arms industry, which tends to drive not only foreign policy, but local national policy as well. They take a tremendous amount of our wealth, pour it into arms, which we don't need, and then use them to dominate or subjugate other people that they don't like or want to subjugate. I'm thinking particularly of Iraq. We've actually got, as British people, we've nothing against the Iraqi people, but they were demonized by the high priests of war in New York, and falsely accused of being involved in 9/11, and then falsely accused of having weapons of mass destruction, falsely accused of having developed nuclear facilities and so on. And we bombed the hell out of the place, which is, of course, another dreadful crime really, against the country. And I have to say, although it's not in the notes here, that that's not totally because of British people. I'm here partly to apologise for us, because the British establishment is very much, as far as foreign policy is concerned, very much controlled by the Zionist lobby. They tend to orchestrate not only the politicians by taking them out there and making them feel as though they're part of the establishment, but they orchestrate the media as well, so that the average person, and including the politicians, do not get the other side of the Palestinian issue, which to me is one of the most fundamental crimes against humanity that we are responsible for, because we handed over Palestine to the Israelis, the Zionists, in 1917, basically, and told them that they mustn't do anything which would upset or harm the interests of the local people. And what are they doing? They're killing them, bombing them from the air. No other country would get away with doing that for more than a few months. They've been doing it for 70 years. So that's my primary interest in Middle East politics, and that's why I hope that eventually some sense will come through to our political leaders when they realize what they're part of. And the same thing, I think, will apply to Oman. I've only recently discovered how tragic our treatment of Oman has been. Sorry, Bahrain, I beg your pardon. It again makes me feel rather guilty being British. And that's one of the reasons why I started the Ministry of Peace, to try and counter the war lobbies, which are basically working for other interests than human rights, obviously. So if I spent about a day working on the history of Bahrain and finding out how it had been attacked and colonized and demonized and burnt to the ground, and how the people have been imprisoned and executed and tortured and so on, ever since 1800 or so. It's pretty bad. It's a pretty bad record. And we're the last of that. Well, we seem to be the last of that troop of people of countries who've partly taken advantage of the fact that it was a useful base. But it also probably had something to do with the pearl fishing industry originally. I don't know. Another thing, of course, was the discovery of oil in 1971. That always attracts the worst of the oligarchs. And they, like the arms dealers, have got a fairly good grip on our politicians, because so much money is involved. They can say, well, you've got to let us do this to the natives or whatever it's called. Otherwise, you will have to pull out and you'll lose all that income or whatever it was. And again, it's not totally unconnected, I don't think, to the Israeli war in 1973, when the oil price obviously went up. And luckily for Bahrain, they benefited from that. So that was a little bit of a benefit. But then the Israelis attacked Lebanon and called it a civil war. And so the Lebanese banks, which are one of the most sort of well-known and reliable banks in the Middle East, the bankers began to, I gather, migrate into Bahrain. So that was, again, an unfortunate thing for the Lebanese, but a benefit to the Bahrainis, I'd say. And that, of course, attracted other people to come into the country and boost the economy that way. But it led to the establishment of a National Assembly. I presume it's because the ordinary people, the citizens, needed to get a little bit more of the cake that was basically, I suppose, going to the higher echelons. It didn't come from the oil.
1 minute, if you can.
Only 1 minute left. Right, let me rush through.
I'm sure we will make a lot of use of your paper.
No, but don't worry.
But the time to present is a bit short.
I should really come back straight on to the thing which I didn't know about, the Pearl Roundabout demonstration, which I gather was quite a significant demonstration of public objection to the way the country was being run against the interests of the ordinary citizens. 150 people died, and it was clearly led to a state of emergency. I've skipped over all the bits about where the British were involved in running the police and the army, and therefore, able to control demonstrations like that. in the interests of Britain, but to some extent, and the ruling family mainly. So all I can conclude really is that we have to work on the British Foreign Secretary and James Cleverly, and possibly even Richard Sunak, I think, is open to this kind of debate, because obviously he's got Indian connections. He's not as sort of solidly right-wing British as most British people are, and he's probably rather more open-minded about what we're up to. So I would say there's some potential there, but how do you persuade them to do anything about the conditions in Bahrain? I would initially say, get him to stop the arms sales and the sales of equipment for persecuting people. But I think that would only lead to other people like the French or the Americans moving in and doing it instead. Probably more effective lever, I think, would be to embarrass the royal family in various ways, but nobody in our establishment is very keen to do that, I don't think. They've still got too much to lose. So really all we can hope for is that the overall hypocrisy that the British government has been churning out for the last 50 years about the way we believe in human rights, but at the same time we're attacking Afghanistan and leaving that as a wrecked country. We've attacked Iraq and done that to them. We've helped the Israelis do what they're doing to the Palestinians. Eventually that record is going to come to the fore in the media. Hopefully, certainly the social media, it's becoming maybe private eye, countries and papers like that might raise it, and that might then help you along. I don't know.
Thank you very much, Dr. James Thring, for this concise presentation. We know you have a lot to say, and you know a lot, but unfortunately the time is a bit short.
Right.
We will read it hopefully in detail later. And of course, I welcome our friend Tara O'Grady and her daughters Jessica, whom I see has grown a lot since we last met her a few years ago. Welcome from Ireland, but before you, I will ask our friend Stephen Bill, who is waiting for us, and he is in Ireland. He went in your place. He thought the meeting was in Ireland. You thought the meeting was in London. So Stephen is in Ireland now. We wish Maria speedy recovery. We are sorry for what happened, for the incident she had yesterday. But at least you are well, and she is well, and that makes us happy to see you smiling with us. Enjoy, and you have always shared our pains and our happiness, and you are once again with us. So please, Stephen Bill, who is a trade unionist since his youthful days, and he is a human rights and political activist as well, from the coalition against war, Stop the War coalition. So Stephen, you have 8 to maximum 10 minutes. I know also that you have always prepared your speeches, and they are long, but they are very, very detailed and useful. So we'll get hold of that later.
Well, thank you, Saeed, for your very kind words and concern for Maria. It is a great privilege to address a meeting of Bahrainis to mark Independence Day. My remarks will focus on the British government's support for repression in Bahrain today. Bahrain's sovereignty rests not in the caprice of the Al Khalifa family. It lies in the undimmed light of the people's demand for freedom, justice, and genuine independence. Our thoughts must first turn then to the martyrs who have already made the highest contribution to the popular cause. So let me honor those who died in struggle in Jail prison: Hassan al-Khattan in 2014, Saeed al-Sahlawi in 2020, Abbas Mahala in 2021 and Hussein Barakat in 2021. Let us also honour the hundreds of prisoners on hunger strike in jail prison as we meet today. They are the flower of the risen people. I think it most appropriate to highlight the prisoners. Last month, the British government accepted a £1 billion investment from Bahrain's Sovereign Wealth Fund. In exchange for that, the British government removed Bahrain from the list of human rights priority concerns. The much vaunted values that the British government espouses are relatively cheaply put aside. The Foreign Office document is a classic whitewash. There are 3 references to Bahrain. The first is on last year's fake elections. The British government notes that these were, quote, peaceful and orderly with an increased turnout, unquote. It goes on. No interested observers were allowed, and the UK continues to encourage Bahrainis to consider inviting observers for future elections. I love the continues to encourage, as though the Bahrainis don't understand what the British government has been saying all along. Now, but apparently the turnout is more important to note than the boycott by the most representative opposition forces. This doesn't rate a mention. Indeed, the government makes no critical observation. Instead, we read some political societies also remain banned, leading to criticism from international rights groups that there was a continuing environment of political repression, unquote. Note that it wasn't the British government that noticed the repression. It was the international rights groups. The British government sees, hears, or speaks no evil of the regime. The second reference is more incredible. Quote, Bahrain continued its long tradition of respecting and enabling freedom of religion or belief, unquote. This is apparently proved by the Bahraini regime having hosted a dialogue last November, which included Pope Francis and Grand Imam Ahmed al-Hayat. The fact that no senior Shia leaders who are critical of the regime in Bahrain were included is evidence enough of this counterfeit tolerance. The British government simply buries the long experiences of discrimination against Shia religious leaders and the Shia community. The third and final reference also praises the regime. Quote, there were some positive global developments on security and justice issues in 2022. Bahrain continued to expand the use of alternative sentencing legislation, which was applied to 1,470 cases in 2022, unquote. I confess to not knowing what is meant here by alternative sentencing legislation, but I'm certain it's not been applied to the 1,300 political prisoners in Al Khalifa jails. This section of the document, the one referencing the alternative sentencing, also has distinct sections, distinct points on the death penalty, torture, and arbitrary detention. There is not one reference to the regime's use of these oppressive practices. Perhaps it's not a world leader here, simply another local gangster. Overall, the Al Khalifa regime got a bargain for its $1 billion. Today, the British government is happy to have Bahrain as a naval base and a hinge point for its support for the new Cold War against China. It has no concerns for the Bahraini people or the real independence of the nation. In fact, throughout the Gulf, the British government is undoing the work of 1971. It now has a further naval base in Oman. The declassified website revealed something like 16 military bases in Saudi Arabia, 15 in Oman, as well as better known bases in the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait. So to say that the British government has withdrawn from east of Suez historically was true, but we have to say the British government has returned, this time not to sustain its empire in India, this time to sustain the United States empire, and in particular, the danger of a cold and hot war against China. No reference whatsoever to the needs of the Bahraini people. So to support that independence, we must demand a withdrawal of British armed forces from Bahrain and the Gulf, and an end to prettifying the Bahraini dictatorship. It is a long struggle for the Bahraini people, but your example is one of the world's beacons of freedom and justice.
Thank you very much. A wonderful speech by Stephen Bell. As always, we are used to your deeply detailed and invigorating speeches, Stephen, and we are proud to have friends like you. And it gives us really good incentive to continue our struggle, and we will continue that. We will not stop at any moment until our demands have been met. And this is why our people now are using this hungry stomachs as weapons. Hunger is as a weapon. You have to imagine when you use hunger as a weapon against the regime, how desperate you have become. Anyway, thank you, Stephen, again. I have 3 more speakers, and they are all wonderful. And I will leave Dr. Jalal to the end that to sum up and to give a Bahraini viewpoint. And now I have 2 friends, Tara and Insiya. So if Insiya allows me, I will ask Tara to give us an Irish view of Bahrain.
Okay.
So welcome and thank you for making all the trouble coming from Ireland to here, and that shows how good you are.
Dr. Saeed, I'm not on my own. There are many Irish people who send their solidarity along with me here today. My name is Tara O'Grady. I work with Human Rights Sentinel and many other non-government organizations, and I've been working on Bahrain over 10 years. And a couple of things that I want to say today with regards to the at least 430 prisoners who are hunger striking. It can't be pushed under the carpet. It's not going away. The young men I know in the last few days, a number of them have been fainting. They're not seasoned at hunger striking like, unfortunately, Abdulhadi al-Khawaja is. However, some of you may know that Professor Damien McCormick, who is an Irish medic and has long been involved with this plight for the Bahraini people, knows Dr. Abdulhadi al-Khawaja and a number of the medics who were arrested and tortured in 2011 after the Pearl Revolution, who had trained in Ireland. He spoke just the other day about his alarm and concern for the health of Abdulhadi al-Khawaja. I know Abdulhadi was taken to the intensive care unit because his heart was racing. He has a history of cardiac problems, and Professor McCormick has said that the Irish stand ready for a medical evacuation to bring Abdulhadi al-Khawaja out and to Ireland so that he can be treated. And he is gravely concerned that Abdulhadi cannot survive another hunger strike. This would be a real turning point for a huge problem for the regime in Bahrain, because his death would be a lit match to an already very dry set of tinder and would ignite a fire fest for Bahrain. They would have, and I would say to warn them egregiously that they are stepping in very sensitive waters by doing this with Abdulhadi al-Khawaja. Abdulhadi and Dr. Ali al-Sengais have been in isolation for years. They've been in solitary confinement. with 23 hours a day stuck in their prison cell and 1 hour a day that they have to take air or to have some exercise. They are very sick men. They need more medical care than that. Their fundamental human right to adequate medical access is being impinged. Indeed, just this week, Abdulhadi Al-Khawaja had his 11th appointment with a specialist cancelled, his 11th appointment. None of us would be able to withstand this sort of slow death, this kind of persecution, to have your medical file not released to your family, to go for medical scans and blood tests and never know the results, to never know if your health is improving, to only be sure it is declining and not be told what measures can be taken to help you. So the case is really alarming. It's gone beyond sensitive. It is making those of us who have been involved for so many years absolutely outraged. This demands of the prisoners are very basic. They're very simple. Good medical access to their files, their scans, their results, for their medical visits and access to medicine to be permitted. That their family visits, the controls put on family visits are absolutely absurd and dehumanizing the prisoners and their families further. If you can imagine you went to prison 10 years ago for political issues because you spoke against what you see as a repressive regime, not because you're a criminal or a drug dealer or you've been involved in racketeering or prostitution, nothing like crime, but for your political outspokenness. And you had a child who, during the time that you started your prison sentence, they were a year old. Here we are 10 years later, and there is a wall of glass between you and your child. So you cannot hold your child and love them or encourage them or tell them it's okay, you know, one day I'll be free. You are prevented from even having that. In this case, this is an infringement against the rights of that child, not only the rights of the prisoner. And prisoners have rights. Internationally, there are many organizations that work for prison reform, but in this particular situation, it is the rights of the child themselves, and many of them, consider the 1,400 prisoners, how many of them have families? So this is something that must also be considered. Also, many of us are not known in human rights by our wealth, we are known by our actions. I know that Britain, because of this hoodwinking of Brexit that was sold to the British people, God help them. I know that because of this, it is a really difficult time for Britain. It is important for Britain's foreign policy to continue to make friends and keep friendships with the old allies. And I understand, although I am not a monarchist myself, my grandmother was a royalist and my great-grandfather taught in the British military school in Dublin. It is not my flavor. However, we all knew from childhood that there was a man who would be king one day. And we had high hopes for him because he has been known to be a man who was more for the people. He had a social mindset. He cared about things that people didn't care to speak about, for example, like the climate and climate change from the 70s and 80s. When Sting brought Chief Raoni from Brazil over to Europe to talk about the canopy of the rainforest and how it would affect the climate, Prince Charles spoke about these things. Britain needed the £1 billion because of Brexit and this sham. Britain needed the £1 billion to add to their coffers, and I understand. But at what cost? At what cost? We thought more of King Charles. We expect more from him. All of us do. He has an international reputation that he built in the shadow of his mother already. So it brings me to this point. Last week, I was in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. I was at the great gathering of the tribes where Chief Raoni, the gentleman who still wears the ancient lip plate, where he had called for 16, 17 of the tribes leaders from the rainforest to come together to speak about the consequence in the rainforest with all of these terrible international agreements with Brazil and China for soybean and GMO produce and all of that. And we were waiting to hear from the ambassador from Britain because they brought a letter from King Charles. So we heard excuse me, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I heard? We waited for the letter from King Charles to be read. And King Charles himself had written to the tribal leaders, and he said, I have solidarity with you. The monarchy sees the problem of the climate here in Britain. We recognize it. We hear your call, Chief Raoni. He spoke to him as an equal from one country to another. And the foreign policy of Britain, this far away in Brazil, where they are not allies, strong allies with these tribal leaders in the middle of the jungle. And he spoke directly to them. They were so pleased to see this letter that he personally had sent an envoy to give his solidarity. Then we look at the behavioral comparison with this ally, who we know that the king comes to visit Britain. We know the family are close with their horse racing and their Formula One interests, and the exchange of land and hotels and yes, we call it sports washing, we call it greenwashing. But to know that King Charles is allowing the human rights situation in Bahrain to be pushed underneath the carpet because of the hush-hush money he was given by Bahrain, we expect more from King Charles. We ask that Bahrain be replaced back onto the list of countries of concern for human rights. And in that tight relationship that they have, please to speak to each other and ask for common sense in the cases of these prisoners, because you will see that they have drawn the red line in the sand, and it is being brought forward to the point of death with these hunger strikes. Thank you for your time.
Sorry, I cannot clap because my hand is not very nice. But you have to clap, yes, for such a wonderful speech by Tara O'Grady. We have always heard from you what is positive, what's encouraging. Samud. Of course, you are a source of Samud to us. Thank you very much, Tara, for your kind words. And now, before the final speaker, we have our friend Insiya Raja, who is a researcher at Bahrain Institute for Rights and Democracy, and holds a master's degree in modern Middle Eastern studies from Oxford University. MashaAllah. Welcome, and let us listen to our young enthusiast and young activist, Insiya.
Assalamu alaikum. As Bahrain celebrates 52 years of independence, I would like to take this opportunity to raise two key issues which have already previously been raised by speakers. So maybe I'll take a little bit of this opportunity to try to shed a different light on things that weren't necessarily covered, which means I might cut my speech a bit short because I don't want to repeat the same things. But on that note, let me start with reiterating the demands, because I think it's so important, of the over 400 brave political prisoners who are on hunger strike in Joe prison. The reason I bring this up right now is because it is one of the first two issues I would like to raise, which is the violations that are currently happening within Joe prison. There is a systematic denial of medical care. There is constant abuse. As recent as a couple of days ago, there were 4 solitary confinement prisoners, 4 death row inmates who were sent to solitary confinement for an incident that happened in May, where they were the ones to be hit over the head, and just for them resisting, many months later, the authorities have sent them into solitary confinement as a reprisal. So let me start with reiterating the demands. The three key demands that we see come out, which is an end to the 23-hour lockdowns that prisoners are subject to daily, the provision of access to medical care and education, which is a fundamental human right, and to reduce the stringent restrictions and family visits, as Mustara had previously mentioned. These are all fundamental human rights requests. Whether you're a prisoner or you're not a prisoner, the fact is you should be afforded and entitled to these human rights. And I think it is the duty of the British government to urge Bahraini authorities to ensure that these demands are met at the earliest possible as these people remain on hunger strike. Last Wednesday, as was previously mentioned as well, Mr. Abdul Hadi Al Khwaja joined the hunger strike. He's refused IVs, he's refused water. And to me, when I just think about how desperate the situation must be for so many people to come together, to go on hunger strike, to demand their fundamental rights, to be able to come in solidarity within a prison cell where there are so many restrictions, to show that kind of solidarity is amazing and is testament to how desperate the situation must be at the moment. It has been 2 years, 1 month, and 3 days since Dr. Jalal Fairooz went on a solid food hunger strike, when his manuscripts, his research manuscripts, which were not political, were arbitrarily confiscated by the authorities. He remains at the Kano Medical Center, held in prolonged solitary confinement, which again brings me to this topic of the systematic denial of medical care in Joe prison, which is slowly killing prisoners, as exemplified by Bahrain's oldest political prisoner, Mr. Hassan Mashema. Mr. Hassan Mashema is currently at a medical facility, right? He's held at the Kano Medical Center. However, he's in remission from cancer and has chronic medical diseases, but he has not been afforded a cancer test that was recommended to him every 6 months. He found out many months ago that his liver is partially damaged, and they haven't done a single test. They haven't followed up. They haven't followed up on any of the reports, despite he needs access to specialists. So just thinking about what a government is willing to do to its oldest political human rights activist is kind of exemplary of the kind of cruelty that the government can embody towards anyone who tries to speak out. Amidst all of this, the UK and Bahrain continue to enjoy an extremely strategic and extremely important relationship. We briefly talked about the FCD, or the Foreign Office's decision to take Bahrain off the human rights priority list countries. This is a very recent decision which came in light of a $1 billion investment pledge into the UK economy. The decision was justified under the claims, as previously mentioned by Mr. Bell, on saying that Bahrain had made progress on 3 key issues, such as religious tolerance, which is just absurd, the use of alternative sentencing, and holding parliamentary elections. First and foremost, the parliamentary elections were neither free nor fair. We learned about how there is continuous systematic discrimination against its majority Shia population, most of the political prisoners in the country today, almost 1,200, held in Jau prison itself, have not been released under this scheme of alternative sentencing that they praise so very much. So the one thing I think I would like to shed light on is the fact that this was such a huge propaganda win for the Bahraini government. Being removed from the UK human rights priority list countries was touted, was the front page news for every Bahraini newspaper that day, with the government basically using it to say, and I quote, Bahrain is a pioneering model of human rights. So I think my question would be that why was Bahrain given this propaganda victory, whilst it continues to remain one of the most repressive countries in the region? As recent as 2022, in the Freedom House report, they were deemed one of the most repressive countries in the region. Why is the Bahraini Crown Prince and top ministers getting absolutely the key access to UK officials, as exemplified in the meeting between Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the Bahraini Crown Prince recently? Why are they being given these extremely high levels of access when they've made no meaningful progress on the death penalty, on the release of political prisoners who continue to be imprisoned for over a decade, and the systematic abuses in jail prison, especially the denial of medical care? It is essential, of course, that human rights remain part of any conversation. Recently, the UK government said that in any trade negotiations, it will not consider human rights to be central. Why not? Human rights needs to be a central part of any conversation that we have today. And before I conclude, I would just like to reiterate the names of Abdul Hadi Al Khwaja, Dr. Jalal Fairooz, and Mr. Hassan Mashema, top figures in Bahrain, and hope that we can all stand in solidarity with the hundreds of political prisoners and hunger strike. And Bahrain has come a long way over the past 52 years, but like many other countries in the world, it still has a long way to go. And it's not gonna happen. This progress is not gonna come through lying behind this veneer of constant denial and trying to whitewash your image constantly. And I think it's also the responsibility of the UK government to not give any more propaganda victories to the Bahraini government, which it is continuing to do this year. Thank you. Shukran.
Thank you very much. Well done, Insiya. Thank you very much. You have been talking with passion. In addition to information, you managed in a nice way to mix the two, facts and passion, which makes your speech an outstanding speech. So thank you very much. Yeah. And we rely on people like you to carry the flag, to be the flag bearer of human rights. So thank you, Insiya. Our final speech before we have one of our friends who are with us who will give a comment afterwards. But before that, we have our final speech, Bahrain perspective on this Independence Day by Dr. Jalal Fairooz, who was a former MP, or he is now a former MP. He was an MP before, but now he is a former MP in Bahrain, elected for Al-Wifaq Society until they resigned in a protest at what was happening in 2011 or 12, I don't recall. But so Dr. Jalal is well aware of the situation and will enlighten us on how he sees and his friends in Al-Wifaq the Independence Day.
Thank you, Dr. Saeed. I would like, first of all, to welcome everybody. Thank you very much for being here. For the Bahraini people, believe it or not, this small meeting will encourage the people to go for the rights of the people of Bahrain, and it will reach all the 1,200 Bahraini imprisoned, and it will give them some boost that they have sincere friends worldwide. And I would like also to start with a nice tweet which was done by one of the leaders of the Bahraini political society, that's Ibrahim Sharif, who you all know about today. He tweeted, he said, it's ironic that the Bahraini government is celebrating 200 years of colonialism and denying 45 years of independence, so-called independence. Of course, today is commemorating the Independence Day and also the dissolvement of the first parliament, of course, in 1969. On 1969 and 1970, when the British were withdrawing, the government of Bahrain then was going everywhere and saying that we will have democracy, we will have rule of the people, and they even went to the head of the Shia clergies in Najaf, and they said we are committed to give the Shias all the right, and that's the way they have been going. When they wanted something from the people, they went and gave promises, and then only just a year and a half of having some kind of a parliament, which was, of course, 2/3 were elected and 1/3 was appointed, was dissolved because of the security law, which was very arbitrary. And starting from there, they even at the time when there was parliament, they started all the arbitrary detentions, torture. Lots of people were killed under torture in the prisons. You come to the 90s, the same. They have promised the people that they will review the conditions, and they will also look into having more democratic facet of Bahrain. But after a year in mid 90s, they have also denied the rights. And when you come to the 2000, they did the same thing. and even in 2011 they did the same thing. It's just that today also one of the fathers of the long-time detainees was tweeting and saying that the head of the prisons in Bahrain has promised that they will give the rights for these hunger strikers, but all the time, all through these 12 years, we have learned that whenever they do that, then under the table they want to have more pressure. So you could see that now in Bahrain the situation is the worst. You wouldn't have any political arena, even any political seminar is being banned, any protest is being banned and crushed, and you can see more and more people are being detained. Lots of people lots of prisoners have been under torture all the time, and they of course, aside from denying their medical care, whenever there's someone who would be at the edge of dying, then they will receive release, and just after 2-3 months you can see that this person would die. The last one was just a week ago, Muhammad al-Muallim. All the time you have this. So this is being continued, and it is really we as political activists here in the UK and whoever you see as Bahrainis, most of them are have been their Bahraini nationality and citizenship have been revoked, including, of course, Dr. Saeed and myself. And unfortunately, the British government is not saying that they are not helping, but they are part of the problem. They are encouraging the government of Bahrain to go free of whatever they are doing to the Bahraini people. It is very unfortunate that they take Bahrain out of this list, and it seems that now they are saying whatever the Bahraini government will do, we will not be pressing towards easing the situation. So I'm trying to summarize. For the Independence Day, Hamad bin Isa in the UK several years ago said that you went out, you pulled out of Bahrain. Who has told you to pull out? You are welcome in Bahrain. And then, of course, having a sea base for Britain in Bahrain being fully paid by the Bahraini budget. So I really appreciate all the talks. I don't want to repeat, but everyone here is responsible to try and see ways to have some pressure on the British government, whether it be the Home Office, the Foreign Office, or heads to try and at least not give the green light for all the torture, all the arbitrary detentions which are being on in Bahrain. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Jalal, for summing up the situation. You have been wonderful, all of you, 5 of you. You have finished your speeches within 50 minutes, and we did not exceed the time. So you have good consideration to time, and you have been speaking concisely, and that has helped us to gain some time to allow one of our friends, Ruri Dyke, who is going to give us a few minutes of his time to highlight the situation because he has been working with the case of Bahrain. So Drury, welcome, and our friends here would like to hear from you. Few words, kindly proceed.
Thanks very much, Said, and hello everyone. Very, very moving talks from you all, Tara, Jalal. Incredible to catch up and revisit what you have been saying. I guess my frustration turns to what we can do together. And my thoughts have been turning recently to COP28 that will be held in the UAE, and a very large coalition that has been assembled to bring to all of the countries of the Gulf, including Bahrain, the challenges and what is made of the promises by the COP28 team, and to apply those to Bahrain. It's a completely uphill challenge for all the reasons that you have been saying, and we know very well. I mean, for our part, for Salam, Bird, Sentinel, Human Rights Sentinel, and all of us in the room, some kind of joint action, if we could come together to address maybe just that one point of the place of Bahrain for the FCDO. Oh God, that would be something. I don't know what the answer is. This kind of meeting that you've convened today, Dr. Said, certainly helps. But I'd really like us to see, like us to come together a bit more often in this way, and somehow pull together what we can in order to counter this very, very powerful and unhelpful narrative that you've all talked about so passionately. You know so well, much better than I do. On September 26th, this will be my last comment on this. On September 26th this year, we, Salam for Democracy and Human Rights, along with Civicus, will be holding a side event at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. And during our visit, we really, really hope to address with European Union nations the kind of challenges that you've all been addressing, and many more of you may wish to address. And we look forward to having your input and participation and support in that event. There will be other events at that time during the forthcoming Human Rights Council session. The struggle is hard. It's uphill. You know it better than I do. But look, I just think from what you've all been saying, we just have to keep on going. To taking it to the authorities, the British authorities in particular, on this occasion. Thanks, Dr. Said. Thanks, everyone. Great interventions. Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Drury. Thank you. You have always been at the front line of action when it comes to human rights issues, and I have known you for the past maybe more than 12, 13 years, and you have always been as active as ever and as optimistic as ever. So thank you for these kind words. And we have a few minutes. If anybody wants to add, we shouldn't take long. We don't want to keep you long, but it has been a very friendly meeting together. And with all these contributions, I think we have made a picture. We have managed to put some jigsaw puzzle pieces together to view a fuller picture of the situation in Bahrain. So if anybody would like to have some comments or questions, our speakers are here. So I would like to see if Jawad wants to say something. You are a human rights activist also, okay. And he was also he is a former MP.
Thank you, Dr. Said, and happy to be here. And thanks a lot for all who made clear points about the conditions in Bahrain and this international let me say, walks over Bahrain due to negligence of the authorities to forget this day. And this is one of the major puzzling that in a state try to systematically neglect this important date, 14th of August. During the end of 60s and beginning of 70s, when British colony wanted to leave that area, they knew that there could be instability and insecurity in the region if they're going to leave their power. For that reason, they given some promises to the people of different nations, mainly Bahraini nations, and promised that a democratic process will be started. And they pointed over this process, saying that the main element to have the security and stability to have the democratic states and to have a power share. And in that promises, Bahraini people agreed with the ruling family to have a state to be a democratic state. And for that reason, Bahraini people opposed the Shah's demand to be that Bahrain to be part of Iran. And they agreed that ruling family to be part of their power share, only on this condition, which is clearly has been indicated in Bahrain Constitution in 1973. And that promises, unfortunately, neither been kept by the ruling family, nor, unfortunately, and here's our point, by British authorities, which they given promises that this power going to be power share. And to our surprise, that after 51 years of this independency, nor we can see the gradual movement toward democracy, we can realize and we can see a firm will by the authorities and unfortunately by Bahraini authorities, Americans and Britain, to reinstate an absolute power of the ruling family, which is totally opposing the democracy. And we believe this will not lead to the security and stability of the region. If that was already clear in end of 60s, beginning of 70s, I think it's much more clear now after half century. And this is the message of Bahraini people. If you want to maintain the security and stability in that region, you have to work together with the people to maintain the democracy. Thank you.
Ahmed, you have something to say?
Nothing to add with it.
Huh?
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add. Ali, Faiz, if you want to say a few words.
Thanks, Dr. Saeed. The situation in the region is very fragile due to the British policy for the past 50 years. They left the region, but they did not leave. They have put their agent in power to manage the situation for their own interest. That's really what happened. Al Khalifa are the agent of British government. Al Khalifa never been elected. Al Khalifa never been part of Bahrain. We did not deny them as a Bahraini, but they did not manage to be part of Bahrain. For the past 250 years, Al Khalifa could not feel they are Bahraini. They couldn't feel it. And that's a problem. They deal with us as an enemy because they don't feel they are Bahraini. This situation is reminding me of what's happening in Africa now. If British want to have the chaos that's happening in Africa, let them continue that policy. Today, on 14th of Feb, we have to have strong message to British government. They must stop this policy. They must stop it. 430 people are facing death for their basic right inside the prison. They're not supposed to be in prison at the first hand. They're not supposed to be, but they're still fighting for their basic right inside the prison. Why is that? Because British government is putting their full support to this tyrant family. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. But there is Desmond here, another voice from Ireland. He has always been a friend, and he would take all the troubles to be present. Like his friend Jim yesterday, he was joining us. He joined us in the protest on his two crutches. So it was heartbreaking to see such a wonderful person coming all the way, walking for, I think, probably a mile or more from his residence to where we were on the two crutches. So yeah, and he said this one will make it tomorrow. So you have been faithful to our cause. Thank you very much. Like Tara.
Pardon from not being here at 2 o'clock at a previous meeting, but I did pick up on the two speakers, and the three speakers, and I listened, and for me, it was history repeating itself. You could quite easily change the title of Bahrain for another country called Ireland, and the same thing was applied about we're going to give you democracy and independence and so on and so on. So we've got 1,000 years of these people. I want to say that from what I understand and picked up, Bahrain is a carbon copy of the UK government. And I have lived and worked in many countries that were under the empire, British Empire, and when they left and give so-called independence. But the one thing I have noticed that every single country I've been to and lived in, they do not give the economic independence. They keep it. And as the gentleman said, they have their own agents in there to make sure that their race horses and their Formula Ones are never is looked after. And when you're dealing with these people in Bahrain or these politicians here in the UK government, they are experts with propaganda. And they are experts with lying and deceiving people. One of the most serious groups in the world. So these are the type of people that you're dealing with, and their command of the English language and how they can floor it up and make it sound great, but at the same time, they're looting the country or throwing people in prison and death, and it's not brought into the public arena. So when you look at the government of Bahrain, you just look at the other twin, the UK government, and that's what you're dealing with. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else with comments, or shall we? Karen is here to say something.
Not really to say something, but I'd just like to ask a question. That we've all heard about how bad the government of Bahrain is, and I know Saeed's been struggling for 20 years, and many of the people here I know for more than 10 years. And I just want to ask, what is the future? Because every year we come here, we talk about all the dreadful things that are going on. They're documented by human rights organizations, by everybody who's somebody in the human rights field, and it doesn't stop. So what's going to happen? Can we have maybe a prediction, a scenario? How do you see the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, it's all along. You would have this struggle and fight between the greedies and the people who wanted freedom, and in between you had people suffering, and of course over the greedy people you would have big supporters. Unfortunately, the Bahraini government, without the support of external supporters, governments like UK would not have gone all the way. But because you could say money talks, and they bribe the governments in the West, and the government all the time in the West are saying that, what we will get from some people who don't have much of power, but we are getting whatever we want from these governments, unless there is a very strong notion of caring about principles in the West will be nurtured. Unless you would have better societies who would care about the rights, not about just taking whatever they want from other nations and not caring about their well-being. Otherwise, yes, we would have repeatedly suffering, and we would have lots of meetings like this every year. This is unfortunate. It doesn't only belong to whatever is going on in Bahrain, but it is international situation. If that changes, believe it or not, things will change in Bahrain soon.
Thank you very much. I will just wrap it up, if you don't mind, in answer to what Karen said. Number one, we are here marking the Independence Day in order to see where our struggle is going. If we manage to get freedom and liberation from the British colonialism, I think we can get also freedom and liberation from the domination by the tribal regime. This is number one. Number two, it is not only our problem. Any problem of anybody, as somebody who is hungry in Africa, is your problem. Is your problem. It's not only his problem. So we all should share the troubles and problems of each other, and we should shoulder the responsibility together. Number three, we have to do our duty. As a human being, I cannot be enslaved. I cannot accept to be enslaved by anyone, by the sheikh or the emir, just because he has an oil well. He cannot be my master. And I will continue to resist that attempt to enslave me at any cost. I may be killed. Many people died in the process of their causes. Many, in everywhere, in every country. How many people died in Ireland? How many people can stay without food until they die? I mean, what sort of spirit and soul you have if you can? We cannot resist not having coffee for 6 hours. Now to stay without food for 60 days until you perish. Okay, like what happened to the Palestinian Khadr Adnan this year, I think earlier this year, and of course the Irish before. I saw in front of me today Zainab Miftah, who was here, sending me a video of prizes being given by the Israelis to their best allies, and the first prize goes to Bahraini ruler, and it is on record. It's not just I have it with me. The first prize goes to the Bahraini dictator. So it tells you a lot of what is the geopolitical situation in this region. So with these words, I would like to thank everybody. I don't want to lecture you again. I just want to thank you all for your contribution. You have done very well, all of you. You have complimented each other by what you have said, and you have given us an impetus to continue our struggle. And you have been inspiring us by your kind words. Thank you very much. God bless you all, and we hope to see you. And of course, our thanks goes to TASA, or the teachers
Union transport.
Not the transport, the teachers paid. It is a very complicated name, but the people in this building have been very generous. So we thank them for their generosity by allowing us to use this room. Thank you all, and we hope to see you soon. Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you.